Thank you, Joanna. Thank you to the organizer for the invitation. It will be very hard to give a talk after so nice talks that preceded me, but I'm sorry, this is what you are going to get now. So this will be is joint work with Claudia Lederman from the University of Buenos Aires. And what I will comment is on regularity results of minimizers of functions that involve the characteristic function of the positivity set of the solution. The function f will have p of x type growth in the gradient variable, and the function lambda is non-negative and bounded. And the idea that we had in mind when we looked at this was to see how far we could go from this kind of functions that we had considered in a previous paper. For this kind of functions, what we could prove was p will always be between two constants larger than one. That when it was Hilbert continuous, any non-negative local bounded minimizer is locally Lipschitz continuous. It is a solution of the equation p of x Laplacian u equals b in the positivity set. When lambda is larger than a positive constant and p is Lipschitz continuous, then the boundary of the positivity set is a C1 alpha surface. Maybe if we rule out a subset of n-1 Hausdorff dimension, then n-1 dimension Hausdorff measure 0. On the other hand, coming from the positivity set to the boundary of the positivity set, the absolute value of the gradient takes this positive value. Of course, coming from the 0 side, it gets a value 0, so Lipschitz continuity is the optimal regularity that one can expect. So in order to get existence of minimizers with boundary data phi in W1P of x, we assume the function f to be continuous in the s variable, C1 in the eta variable, having this p of x growth in the eta variable. The bound from above in terms of s is s to the tau of x, where tau is the Sobolev conjugate of p if p max is less than n. Any bounded function that without loss of generality, we can assume that is larger than or equal p of x if p min is larger than n. In this case, we will just consider the case where tau of x is p of x. And in order to get uniform bounds and to get existence of minimizers, we need a bound from below in terms of s that is a minus constant times s to the q, where q is any number strictly less than the minimum of tau in omega. Since what we are interested in is the regularity of minimizers, in most of the work, what we had was we already had a minimizer, and we were interested in proving existence of some solutions to equations that were actually minimizers of the functional with lambda identically 0. And this we needed in subsets of a small diameter. We didn't need those to exist in the whole domain omega. So we had another set of estimates on f that will give us this existence, the same estimate from above, but from below, instead of having here a constant exponent q strictly less than the tau of the minimum of tau everywhere, we assume here r of x less than or equal tau of x minus a positive constant in the small domain omega, where we want to prove existence of minimizers. And what we needed from omega prime was that the oscillation of tau in omega prime be less than half this constant. And if r and tau are continuous functions in omega, then we can get this situation if the diameter of omega prime is small enough. This is another result that will say that if we have a function u in W1P of x, and we want to get a minimizer with boundary values u in the subset omega prime, we can do this under this less restrictive condition on the growth of f from below. But anyhow, in many, many examples, the bound from below was independent of S, so any of those results could be used. Okay, so in this talk, P is always assumed to be Helmholtz continuous. And of course, if lambda of x is identically 0, we just have the integral of f, and any minimizer is the solution of the Euler-Lagrange equation associated to this function f. A is the gradient of f in the eta variable, b, the right-hand side is the derivative of f in the s variable. But if lambda is not identically 0, then minimizers are not solutions of the equation. But as I said before, in many situations, we needed to look at solutions of the equation, and we needed regularity of these solutions of the equation. So we asked also for some hypotheses on the functions a and b that will give C1 alpha regularity of the solutions. And one set of those that we can assume are those by Fang in 2007 in JDE. I will not go through this, but they allow for P of x growth in the gradient variable for both A and B, tau of x growth for V in the for B in the V variable, Helder continuity of A in the X variable. So under these assumptions, what Fang proved was that bounded Wick solutions were locally C1 alpha, and he got estimates on the C1 alpha norm in subsets. But since he needs to have bounded Wick solutions and a control of the L-infinity norm, we need some result on this kind. One such result that gives control of an infinity norm was found by Fan and Zhao in a previous paper. But under the assumption that the right-hand side growth in the eta variable has a power that's less than P of x. They get local estimates, and also if the boundary datum is bounded in the whole domain omega prime and the boundary of omega prime is smooth, they get global estimates for the infinity norm of the solution V. But one situation we really wanted to be able to cover is when F has this form here. And when F has this form here, the term B has P of x growth in the eta variable. So we need other L-infinity estimates for solutions that will allow for this kind of growth. On the other hand, if F has this form here, then it is very easy to be under the situation of the paper of Fan and Zhao. But I will come back later to other L-infinity estimates that we can get that will allow us to consider also situations like the one above here. On the other hand, there is another very important estimate that is used in order to prove Lipschitz continuity of minimizers of Bernoulli functionals. In the W1P setting, P constant, but not only P constant, it was important that it was for the homogeneous P Laplacian. What is known, is very well known, is that if you have a function in W1P and a function in W1P that coincides with U on the boundary of the set omega prime and is P harmonic in omega prime, then the difference between the gradient of U to the P and the gradient of B to the P is bounded below if P is larger than or equal than 2 by the integral of grad U minus grad B to the P, and if P is less than 2 by the integral of this integral. And one way in which this inequality is used is the following. Assume that we are not looking at two functions, but we are looking at the sequence UN and a sequence Vn of p-harmonic functions that coincide on the boundary. And assume that the UNs are minimizers of the Bernoulli functional with lambda n's that going to 0 uniformly. So if the functions UN are minimizers with lambda n, then the left-hand side is bounded by the infinity norm of the lambda n times the measure of omega prime. So it's going to 0. So if the sequences UN and Vn are converging, these inequalities, either this one or this one, depending on the value of p, gives that the limit of UN coincides with the limit of Vn. And the good thing of this is that the limit of Vn is p-harmonic, so it's smooth, and if the Vn's are non-negative, it satisfies Harnack inequality. But in principle, since the UNs are not p-harmonic, then in principle, you don't know that the limit of UN has these properties, but since the limit of UN coincides with the limit of Vn, it inherits these properties. And this is something that is very useful. So in the previous paper I was talking about before, with this kind of function, then we prove this inequality. This left-hand side here is the integral of f of u minus f of v. And it's larger than or equal, not just one integral, but the sum of two integrals, one where p is larger than or equal than 2, the other where p is less than 2. And when we use this inequality with sequences UN and Vn, the UN minimizer with lambda n's, and we wanted to prove that the limits of UN and Vn coincide, then in some of those applications, not only UN and Vn were changing with n, but also p was a sequence Pn changing with n. And so we are not integrating on a fixed set here and here. So the proof that the limits coincide is isn't more involved. It's not so straightforward, but it can be done. So now when we wanted to generalize this situation to a general F, we realized that an inequality like this one does not hold without further assumptions. So what we assume is what we will call assumption H, and is the following. 2 times the absolute value of the derivative of A with respect to S dot psi W be less than or equal than this term plus the derivative of B with respect to S times W squared. The assumptions that we're making, I didn't talk about these, are ellipticity assumptions with that gives here a bound with psi squared and the norm of eta to the p of x minus 2. But the thing is, in this inequality that is important is that this is non-negative. So since this has to hold for any psi, if I put psi equals 0, we get 0 here, I get 0 here. And we see that necessarily B sub S is non-negative. So we can only consider situations in which B sub S is non-negative. So now assume that B sub S, I know that is non-negative, and A is independent of S. Then this is 0, this is non-negative, and as I told you before, this is non-negative and the inequality always holds. Okay, so what we proved, as I said before, if condition H holds, then given U in W1P and V, the solution of the Euler-Lagrange equation but with boundary values U, then the integral of f of U minus f of V is bounded below in the same way as it was before. So as I said before, if the condition H, we want to see situations in which it holds. One situation is that A be independent of S and B sub S non-negative. On the other hand, necessarily B sub S is non-negative, as I said before. An observation is that if the condition holds, so B sub S is non-negative, if moreover B of x00 is identically 0, then constant functions are super solutions of the equation if they are positive and subsolutions if they are negative. So on the other hand, if condition H holds with ideas similar to those leading to the main inequality, we can prove a comparison principle between SU and super solutions. So if condition H holds and moreover, B of x00 is identically 0 by letting the constant M be the infinity norm of U or minus the infinity norm of U, we see that we have a control of the infinity norm of the solution in terms of the infinity norm of the boundary values. Of course, all these results are for solutions of the equation, but we would also like to know that there are solutions of the Bernoulli functional, minimizers of the Bernoulli functional that are non-negative and bounded, because we will be working with those kind of solution of minimizers. So we want a maximum principal result without that will hold without the assumption that lambda of x be 0, and we get one that is very easy to prove and holds without the assumption lambda 0 and even without the assumption h. So we get existence of minimizers that are non-negative and bounded if the boundary that is non-negative and bounded. So let us start with a regularity result for the minimizers of the Bernoulli function. So as I said before, they are not solutions of the Euler-Lagrange equation, but they are always subsolutions of the Euler-Lagrange equation. And the reason is that if we take a non-negative test function, then the set where U minus epsilon phi is positive is contained in the set where U is positive, and since lambda of x is non-negative, there is an inequality when we write that U is a minimizer and compare with a functional, the function U minus epsilon phi, and take divided by epsilon, letting epsilon go to 0, then we get this inequality as usual. On the other hand, in the interior of the positivity set, U is a solution of the Euler-Lagrange equation, and the reason is that if now the non-negative test function has support inside the positivity set, then the positivity set of U plus epsilon phi coincides with the positivity set of U. So we get the same inequality as we got before, but with a plus instead of a minus. And so finally, the inequality here is reversed and we get equality here. So in the proof of the Lipschitz continuity, it is very important to know that the minimizer of the Bernoulli functional is actually a solution in the positivity set, not just in the interior of the positivity set. And so for that purpose, we need to prove in advance, before looking at the Lipschitz continuity, the continuity of the minimizer, so that the positivity set is open. And the way in which we prove the continuity is by proving Hölder continuity. And so, as I said, this will give us the minimizer is a solution in the positivity set. So I will give an idea of the proof of the Hölder continuity, because in the proof we use the main inequality again, but in a way different from the one with sequences that I was talking about before, that is used in the proof of the Lipschitz continuity. So the way in which we prove Hölder continuity is the following. It's local Hölder continuity. So we will take a subset omega prime compactly containing omega of so small enough diameter, and we will prove that there is a radius or not positive and a power p minus, such that for any point in omega prime, there is a bound of the p minus mean value of the gradient in terms of this C rho radius to the alpha minus 1. The constant C depends on the infinity norm of U, and it will depend on rho, not about alpha, that is a constant between 0 and 1, is universal. It depends on omega and p. It does not depend on omega prime. So this gives the Hilbert alpha continuity in omega with bounds in any omega prime compactly containing omega. Here the power p minus, it will be the minimum value of p in an intermediate set omega second that is what appears in the whole proof, that we need this omega second to have small enough diameter, and this is why we will ask omega prime to have small enough diameter. So in order to be able to control this integral, the thing that we will do is to control this integral by a similar integral, but with V here, where V will be a solution of the Euler-Lagrange equation that coincides with U on the boundary of a ball BR. The R will be larger than this rho that we have here. And why is this a good thing? Is because solutions are C1 alpha. They have estimates that in principle U as a subsolution doesn't have. So as in order to have existence of a solution in a ball, we need the radius of the ball to be small, because we are with this estimate for F in terms of a power R of X from below and not the power Q. So the proof relies in this estimate. We estimate the integral of grad U to the P of X in the ball V rho by the integral of grad V to the P of X in the ball V rho plus CR to the N. This R is different from this rho. This R is the radius of the ball where V is the solution that we construct. In the boundary of this ball is V coincides with U, and rho is smaller than R. And the way in which we get this inequality is by using the main inequality. And here's the way the main inequality is used. On the one hand, we have this, and this comes from the fact that U is a minimizer with lambda of the Bernoulli functional. So this integral here is less than or equal to the infinity norm of lambda times the measure of the ball of radius R. And the main inequality tells us that this left-hand side controls the sum of these two terms. So each one of these is bounded by C times R to the N. And by working a little bit with these two integrals, we finally end up with this inequality that we get for any radius rho less than or equal R. But as for this function, we have only local estimates. We really want this rho to be strictly less than R. And actually what we will do is to take rho less than or equal R over 2. And the way in which we do this is by taking rho R to the 1 plus epsilon with R that was already less than or equal R naught. We ask R naught to be small, so that R naught to the epsilon is less than or equal 1/2. So here rho will be less than or equal R over 2. And the epsilon is any number less than or equal P mean over N, could be P mean over N. And this is universal, is independent of omega prime. And the proof continues by proving that not only the gradient of V is bounded in this smaller ball, but that the bound depends on the radius and on the maximum value of V in the ball in this way. The infinity norm of V is controlled by the infinity norm of U that is universal. It is something that we have, and this is because we are under one of the many situations in which we know that we have this kind of control. Once we have this inequality, how do we finish? Well, remember, this integral was controlled by the integral of C is by C r to the n plus the integral of grad V to the P of x. Grad V to the P of x is controlled by r to the minus P of x. And this is controlled by r to the minus P plus, where P plus is the maximum value of P in the ball, in the set omega second, and then the measure of the ball where we're integrating. Now, what we wanted really was to bound this integral with this constant P minus. So we look at how can we control this by this integral that we know how to control. And well, where the gradient is less than or equal 1, this is bounded by the measure of the unit ball. Where this is larger than 1 is controlled by the integral of grad U to the P. Now we come here, and when we divide by rho to the n, we have this term is C r to the minus P plus, and this term is r over rho to the n, and this is 1 over r to the epsilon n, and epsilon n is less than or equal to P plus, and so both terms are bounded by r to the minus P plus, and this is a constant, so with r small, it's always also bounded by C r to the minus P plus. In terms of rho, it gets this form, and then we take the power 1 of the P minus, and we have this inequality. Now, since P is continuous, we can bound P plus over P minus in this way, if the diameter of omega second is small enough. And we have this inequality, and this is a power between 0 and 1. So we would end our proof. And the only thing that was needed was to see that the bound of the gradient of V it takes this form in terms of the radius and the infinite norm of V. To this end, of course, what we do is we look at the scale function W, defining the unit ball. It is non-negative and less than or equal 1, and prove that the gradient in half the ball is bounded by a universal constant. Then looking at what the gradient of W is, we get this inequality. So we have to look at what equation W satisfies, and what it satisfies is a solution in the ball B1 of a rescaled equation. And we want to use the estimates for the gradient of the paper of Fan. And when you look at the constants in the estimate in the hypothesis of Fan for these functions A bar and B bar, they degenerate very badly with R and M, so it wouldn't give a universal constant independent of R and M. But we realized that if we multiply the equation by r over m to the p minus minus 1, w is still a solution of equation B1 between 0 and 1, w, and these functions satisfy the hypothesis of Fan with universal constants, and so we get the bound by of gradient w in B1 half, and we are done. So I would like to talk about the Lipschitz continuity, but it's much more involved. I just said some things of how we use inequality H in this proof, but the argument is proved by contradiction. We have sequences of solutions. We have to perform two scalings. It's very, very involved. So if someone is interested, the paper appeared already online. So thank you very much for your attention, and thank you everybody for a very, very nice session, very, very nice talks.